We are going to do a few of the images today. Actually, I think most of them are from some of the locations that we've been shooting in our Barnes workshops. The folks that did come this fall had a really good time, and we're still finding new locations. We actually went out driving around on Saturday for a bit and found another property and met the owners, and they've invited us to come and roam around the property next year. So we're trying to get more and more that where we can actually go on the property and get some close-up photos. And this is one of them. We met the owners this year, and this is an old farmstead. This house was in their family for a long time, and there's a barn next door that we also photographed. But I just thought the house was really cool. And we're going to go ahead and get started processing this. For this one, I'm going to be doing Photoshop and Luminar. We are obviously going to change the sky. It was a little bright, the angle I was shooting at that day, but it was a good candidate for doing that. So as usual, I'm going to duplicate my background layer. I do Control J to duplicate that. There's like 5 ways you can duplicate a layer in Photoshop. And this one needed just a tad bit of straightening. So I'm going to click on my crop tool, and let's get rid of the ratios I had in there. I don't really need that. Let's take this back all the way out. And it just needs just a teeny bit of straightening. So I'm going to click on the straighten tool, and let's try and straighten this part. And that looks pretty good. You can also put your cursor up in the corner and use the grid to straighten your image. So that's another way of doing that. And then I just wanted to crop a little bit as well from this. I'm going to come up a little on the bottom. I want to come in just a tad on the left and a little bit over here on the right. And I want to keep this one all the way up so I don't lose my tree. Hang on one second. We have a question already?
How do I enlarge the screen? I only have a small portion.
Somebody said, how do they enlarge your screen? They're only seeing a little portion of it. That would be a setting in the computer. There is on Zoom, there should be an icon near the upper right where you can enlarge the whole Zoom screen to your full screen, just like you do with a button similar to this in Photoshop, like a little square button, and that would enlarge your screen. All right. So I'm going to go ahead now and let's see, we straighten this. Dave was trying to talk to me too. Sorry, folks. All right, so I'm going to go in here, and first I decided I wanted to warm this up a little bit. So I'm going to go under the image, and I'm going to go down to my adjustments panel, and then over to photo filter. And I'm going to add this warming filter. There's various filters you can add in here. And these are the types of filters you would normally use on your camera. So I'm just going to go with a warming filter, and I'm going to leave it at about the 25%. Actually, I'm going to go up just a little bit, about 33%, and say OK. And you can see that added just a tad of warming. It just took away that kind of blue hue that the picture had. So now I want to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this. Actually, I'm going to merge these layers. So I'm going to you're going to see me do merge layers as I go along. Sometimes I do various things, and then before I take them into Luminar or Topaz, or even sometimes Nik, I want the other programs to be able to see everything I've done, not just the one layer I'm on. So in this case, I could just duplicate this. But I'm going to demonstrate the merge layer, and I'll be talking about this as we go along. So on a PC, it's Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. On a Mac, it would be Command, Option, Shift, E. And I always rename my layer merge just so I know that that's what it is when I get to that point. And then we're going to go into our Luminar. So we're going to go under Filter, Skylum, Luminar 4, and they do have the new Luminar AI coming out next month, and I have a beta of it right now that I've just started playing around with. There's some cool new features, so if you're not a Luminar user, I know they're also going to have some deals going on right now for Black Friday, and I'm going to be including too in the blog some other things from other people like Topaz and Luminar and stuff, so that you can get all the good deals that are out there. Alrighty, so now that we're in here to do the sky replacement, I want to be on the creative tab. These are your 4 main tabs. So you have your essentials, which are where you would do all your normal correction. And then the creative tab lets you do some really fun stuff. And I love this AI sky replacement. This is the best thing I've ever found to replace a sky. It beats every other program hands down. So we're going to click on that one. I'm going to click on sky selection, and I'm going to actually bring in one of my own clouds. Some of these I've imported, and some are the ones that came with the program. And I am going to use one called Streaks of Gold, which is right here. This is one of my newer ones from actually from my first sunset collection. So we're going to click on Streaks of Gold. And it's going to, just like that, replace the sky. And it does a great job around trees and things, which are always so hard to select. And then we can make some tweaks to it to adjust it a little bit. So the horizon blending, I'm going to leave it 20. The horizon position, I'm going to bring down a little bit, and that adjusts where the horizon is on the image. And I'm going to come back to like 15. And relighting the scene. The other thing that Luminar does very well is it not only changes the sky, but it actually changes the lighting to match that sky. And then you can also adjust it even more with the relight scene. And I'm going to really warm this up and go up to about 60. There was a question in Photoshop, why didn't you use a non-destructive adjustment layer for the photo filter instead of an image layer? You can do it that way, and I typically do my adjustments that way, but since I duplicated my layer, it still was non-destructive in that way because my base layer is still there. Thank you, that's a good question, Peter. So let's see, and I'm going to Sky Global. I'm going to leave it 30. And then I'm going to go back over to the Essentials tab, and I'm going to make some basic changes here. So I'm going to go up under AI Enhance and AI Accent. I'm going to move to 7. Structure, I'm going to move to 35. And these numbers are all just because I've done these projects and wrote it down so I could replicate it for you, but you just go in and start moving sliders like in most programs. You're going to just play around until it makes your particular image look good. We're going to go under color, and I'm going to up the vibrance a little bit. Details enhancer, down here, I'm going to, this is just like the details I like to do in Topaz, so we're going to up the small details and the medium a little bit. And then we're going to go down to denoise, color denoise, 19, landscape enhancer. Let me do dehaze a little bit. And then the vignette, we're going to add a little bit of a darkening to the edges. And then I'm going to go back to the Creative tab. And I'm going to go down to AI Augmented Sky. And this one has a bunch of things you can actually add to your image. You can add auroras, you can add hot air balloons, you can add birds and clouds and fireworks and all kinds of things. In this case, I'm going to add some birds. And I'm going to click on Birds 1. And I'm going to place the object. And there they are. Took a little while for them to pop up. And I have the bounding box once I click on the place object, and I'm actually going to move these up a little bit because they're kind of down behind the mountain here. And I want them to look like they're flying up from the trees. So we're going to move that up to about there. And then I'm going to go down to mystical and add a little bit here. And this kind of just gives a little bit of a glow to the image. It's very subtle. If you go crazy, it gets a little dramatic. It's kind of like that Orton effect. So we're just going to give it just a little bit of that. And then we're going to say apply, and that's going to take us back into Photoshop. Somebody asked in the questions, why would you use a sunset sky here? You can see from the shadows of the house that this picture was taken at mid-afternoon. That is true, but it is art, and I happened to decide I wanted this to be a sunset. I wanted to get very dramatic with this one. So I chose the sunset. Always your option on your images because it is yours, and you can play and have fun and do what you like. So this is exporting now back to Photoshop. And this one is going to be completed. So yes, it's a little bit brighter on this side of the roof, but you know, if there was some sun over here, yeah, it could still have a little bit of lighterness there. And then we have the tree. I probably should have flipped the sky so it'd be brighter on the left, the way the shadows are going. But I just kind of like the color of this. I thought it looked really nice overall. So that's my finished image with this one. I always save my files as a TIFF file first, so I have my layered file and can go back and change things if I wish. If I decided I didn't want this, I could just delete that layer and still have my image and the filter that I applied. And then you can save it as a JPEG afterwards and take it from there. Alrighty, so let's close this one. I'm not going to save it because I already have it saved. And we're going to go on to our next image. So I'm going to open up the original file, and this I am going to do one later on and show you the Lightroom adjustments. These have already been had the basic adjustments done in Lightroom. So this one, obviously, we have to do some perspective correction. And I'm going to do this here in Photoshop because that's how I started this image. And then after I'm done, I'm going to also show you the Nik Products has a new perspective feature. And I wasn't quite as happy with that one, and I'll show you why at the end. I'll go back and show you that later on. So again, I'm going to duplicate my layer, Control J or Command J if you're on a Mac. And we're going to go up to Edit, Transform, Perspective. And I'm going to scroll back so you can see the handles as I do this. And I'm just going to grab one of the corners, either side, it doesn't really matter, and I'm going to bring it out. And I'm going to get it not quite straight here just because it starts making the church look like it's leaning a little bit the other way. So I'm really more focused on the church than the flagpole. It's okay for me that that's not quite straight. So once you get that where you want it, hit the check mark up here on top. And now we have a better perspective on our scene. So you can rename this layer if you wish. I sometimes do that when I'm working, just so I remember what I did on layers. And then we are going to I'm going to crop this, I'm not going to crop this one. We're going to go back and, we're going to go on to Skylum because I also want to change this sky. It was a beautiful day, bright blue sky, and I'm actually going to copy this layer again to do my sky change. So we're going to go up here to our filter, Skylum, Luminar, and then I decided after I changed the sky, or actually even before I changed the sky, that I really wanted to try a black and white on this. And I wanted something very dramatic. So I thought it really needed some sky. This was something I wanted to show you. And both Topaz and Luminar do this. If you don't delete the cropped pixels, it does not recognize cropping from another program. So I'm going to cancel this for a second. So I do have that up here. So what I'm going to do to avoid that is I'm going to flatten this layer, and then I'm just going to, and then reduplicate it. And now when I go into Luminar, it will see that cropped image. Usually with Topaz, if I have the delete cropped pixels checked, it will not do that. And I think it's because we didn't actually crop it. We just did the perspective. So let's go back to our Luminar. And somebody asked, what's the difference between flatten and merge? There are times when you only want to merge, say, maybe 2 layers out of a whole bunch, and that's when you would use the layer merge command. You can actually select all of the layers and merge them, would be the same as flattening, but when you hit flatten, it's going to take all of your layers and flatten them. And again, I normally don't do that, but sometimes just for certain software, we need to do that. So I'm going to go in here now and go back to my Creative tab and go into my sky replacement. And I'm going to go into my sky selection, and I'm going to use my rays, where is it? Soft blue. And this is from the new rays collection that I just released last week. So this is one of my own skies. The horizon blending is okay. The horizon position, I want to move down a little bit. And that's just so that I get a little more of the sky up here. You'll see a couple of the areas I had to play around to get this one to merge properly with the tree. So I'm going to keep making adjustments, and you'll see that get better. So relighting the scene, we're going to leave there. Sky global. This is one of the things that helped fix that. You can see now it's merged properly down here. And then under advanced settings, let's see if we can move that out of the way. We're going to click on close gaps, which is another way to adjust any gaps between, especially branches and things, and the sky. And then in here, sky local, I took way up to 83, and that gave me a much better merge in this area. Now, even though this image had sun rays, I wanted to make those even a little bit stronger. And one of the things under the augmented sky is sun rays, I believe. Nope, I take that back. It's back under sky replacement. I'm sorry, sunrise tab. Try clicking the right tab. Okay, so we have select sun rays. So we can tell it where to place the center of our sun. So it just popped the dot over here, and I'm going to bring this about an inch or so from the edge, but way up just at the top of the image, so you can barely see that circle. And then I'm going to change the amount, and you're going to see sun rays start to appear from that, emanating from that little spot. Overall look, sun rays length, brought back a little bit. Penetration, we went up to get them a little bit brighter. And then under advanced settings, you can change the number of sun rays. You can see them moving as I slide that. The sun radius, I brought back a little bit. The sun glow radius, I'm going to bring back because I don't really want a big bright sun up there. The sun glow amount. The sun warmth, I'm going to warm it up a little bit more. And the sun rays warmth, we're also going to bring up a little bit. And then we can even take that spot and try and move it way up off of the image itself, because I really don't want a big bright spot there, but we want to see where those sun rays are coming from. So it just emphasized what was already there in the image. And I'm going to hit done, and then apply to go back to Photoshop. Alrighty. And okay, so I'm going to check on some questions here. Somebody said, do I like it better than the new sky replacement in Photoshop? I actually haven't downloaded the new Photoshop yet. I had a lot of seminars in the last week, and I know some people have issues with new software. I kind of get nervous about downloading it when I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of things. So in the next week or so, I'll be doing that. I've heard good things about the Photoshop one, though. Luminar 4 sky replacement, somebody else asked about that. In Luminar, when you replace the sky, can you get images of the sky options in addition to the name of them? In the new Luminar AI, they are going to add thumbnails so that you can actually see the skies. What I've done for Luminar 4 was I actually have folders of the skies of the ones that came with Luminar. You can export them, as well as my own, so I could look in the folder first and kind of decide which one I wanted to make it easier to see. Somebody said they're having trouble hearing me, so I'm going to try and adjust my mic. I do have a headset on. Maybe I was didn't have it quite close enough, so hopefully that's a little bit better. And is there an option in Luminar to brighten the areas touched by the rays? You would have to go in and manually do that. It's not part of that function, but you could brighten it. And I'm actually going to make some brighten adjustments in here in just a moment. Okay, so now we are back to Photoshop. So now I'm going to go into Nik. I have my Nik panel dock down here on the left. Silver Effects Pro. And Nik products make their own layer, so that's why I did not duplicate my layer like I normally would, because it actually will add its own layer. So on the upper left of the preset library, you can look at all of the presets, or you can narrow them down by different categories. And the one that I'm actually using is the Classic tab. And the preset that I liked was number 6. Which was high structure. I really wanted something very dramatic. And then in this right-hand panel, I did move the contrast up to like 10%. And then in the selective adjustments panel, this is where you can, one of the things unique to Nik are these control points where you can target an adjustment just to the particular area you want it to affect. So it's almost like having the ability of masking without having to do the layer mask. So I am going to click on control point, and I'm going to add one over this tree so I can brighten this area up a little bit. So I'm going to start with it about here. And this top little slider will let you see the area this will affect, and you don't have to cover your exact area. It actually is smart enough to know what areas to affect that are similar to each other. And you can either move these sliders here, it has brightness, contrast, and structure, or, and there's more if you hit this little down arrow, or you can use the sliders over here. But because I'm targeting this, I'm going to use this particular slider, and the brightness I'm going to bring to 16%. Contrast to 14, and structure just about 9. Come back a little bit. And I'm going to add another control point over, I want to add one over the flag. So I'm going to click my control point to turn that one off, click here, and I gotta add one here. I'm just having a time today. Oh, and if you click this little tab over here, it'll actually show you the area that adjustment I just made with the control point affected. So then you could adjust your circle if you needed to. So it's kind of a good way to see, you know, the area that it's been affected. And that's just this little box on the row of the control points. So here you can either duplicate a control point or you can add a new one. And this one I'm only going to want a very small circle because I just want to affect the flag. And I'm going to bring my brightness to 29%. And that's the only thing I'm adjusting. I just wanted to bring in some brightness to that area. And again, you could kind of see where that affects just that little area. So if I wanted to make that circle a little bit smaller, I could do that. Alrighty, and then under finishing adjustments, I'm going to add a border on this one. They have some cool borders in here. And I'm going to use under image borders. There's 14 different type, and if you just hover over each one, it'll show you what it does. And I'm going to use number 8, and then I'm going to bring the size of it down because I just want it to be a narrow border. I don't want it to be quite so wide. I just want to give a little accent to my edges. And then I'm going to hit OK to go back to Photoshop. Alrighty, and I can reduce this down, and that is our black and white image that would be completed. Hold on, do we have a question? Lots of questions. All right, let me take a look at the questions and see what we have. Could you flip the sky horizontal so the rays would be coming down the other side? Yes, you can. You can change that when you're in Luminar. I guess I should, I liked the way it looked on this guy. I was looking at the rays coming down on the tree, and because it is cloudy, again, it's art. I wasn't looking to replicate, a perfect scene. In a way I was, but in a way I wasn't. I was looking for the drama of the rays right now. Could you adjust the church to make it not so bright? Yes, you could do that, and I can do that here in Photoshop. But again, I was going for a very high contrast type of an image. Everything is always adjustable, and it's always adjustable to your taste. You are the artist, and you get to make those decisions. So I'm giving you more the how-tos and just demonstrating some of the things you can do with these programs. It may not be a perfect image, but I happen to like it. So we're going to go with it the way it is. Somebody asked, in Luminar, you can only import one sky. How did you import all of your own skies in there? I noticed when I was trying to import some in the beta of AI, that it was letting me do them one at a time. And I do know I was able to do that before, like the whole folder full. So I'm going to have to actually research that, and I will try and answer that in the blog. I do, with the recording, it also records all of these questions. So if I don't get to something today that I think is useful and pertinent and that I can answer easily in the blog, I will do that. Probably those will be in next week's blog because of the holiday this week. But I definitely will try and answer that because that is a good question, and I was actually wondering that myself. Alrighty, so I'm going to close this, and then I'm going to reopen the first image just to show you the difference in the Nik perspective function. And the one reason that I didn't like it as much is that when I did it in Photoshop, and let me show you that again. Let's go right to the Nik one first. The Photoshop one, it adjusted my church so it didn't cut it off the top. And when I used perspective effects, it was straightening the church, but it also was making it go out of the top of my frame, which I did not like. So the perspective we're going to use over here, and I have to remember how to do this because I've only done it once or twice. This just came out with the latest update to the Nik products with version, I think it's 3.3 now. Nope, that's not the one I want. Let's see. Oh yeah, we want that one. So you click on this little up and down lines here under perspective, and then you can take this line and move it. Oh, I remember what I need to do. I said I haven't done this much. So we can actually take this line and move it over what we want to straighten. If I remember correctly. Let's see if I can get this to work. And then from here, let's see. Nope. I guess I should have written it down. Trying to remember what I did. Let's try the auto. Well, I did get this to work the other day. Aspect ratio. Let's see what auto does. Open the original file. Cancel. I guess that's why I didn't use this. But what happened was maybe if I do this, when I straightened it, it brought the top of the church way up above the frame. So that really didn't work for me, even though it straightened it. It totally made it messed up. So I'll have to do this and demo it on the blog again because I don't remember which other control I used. Like I said, I only did it one time, but I'll show it to you again. Somebody asked to see it again in Photoshop. So you want to go under Edit, Transform, Perspective. And all you do is grab either one of these top handles, the top corners, and just drag it. And you can see how it's making the church like shorter, but it's actually still keeping it in the right perspective of the actual scene. And so it's straightening it. And that would be how that works. And we have a question. What's that do? You draw a line from under auto perspective. Okay, under somebody was telling me how to do it in Nik. Let's try it one more time. See if we get it to work. So let's undo this one. And let's see if I can make it work. It's been a busy week and I didn't practice as much as I usually do. So let's see. Try the lower auto under perspective. Auto. Verticals only. And nope, that's not it. And somebody said, draw a line from top to bottom where it is vertical. Well, I'll have to figure it out because I'm still not getting it and I don't want to waste time on it. I have a lot more to cover. All right, so let's move on to our next image. And we're going to scooch that out of the way and close this guy. No, we don't want to save it. All righty. This one I thought came out really cool. So this is my original. And you can see, I like these flowers. There's a lot going on in the background and we're going to get rid of that. You're going to be pretty amazed what we end up with because it will look nothing like this. So I've duplicated my background layer. I'm going to do some healing and cloning and get rid of some of this stuff in the background. You can do healing and cloning on a separate layer. All you have to do is add a new blank layer. And when you're using, if you use the healing tool, just make sure the sample all layers is checked so that it will read the layers beneath it. And sometime I start with the healing brush and see if that will work before I get into cloning. And I'm not going to be too, that's not great. I'll actually work on some of these bright spots. I also want to tone down a little. I know I'm going to be doing a lot of things to this background, so it's more about getting more consistency of color than really cleaning up, say, the leaves. So you're going to be like, what the heck is she doing as I do this? And then we're going to go into the clone stamp, and I think that's going to work better for most of this. And again, you can do this on the separate layer. Just make sure current and below is selected, so it will read this layer as well as the one beneath it. And I'm just going to sample and kind of paste over these areas. I'm not worrying too much about getting patterns. I will probably go back and do a little bit of healing to just blend some of those. But again, it's more about color in this background because I know I'm going to do some other things on here, and I just don't want all of this really bright stuff in the background. And we're going to do more even as I go along. You're going to see me doing some healing and cloning more than once on this particular image. As I started doing different effects, I decided I needed to get rid of other areas. All right, so let's see if we can get some darker greens in here. Now remember, as you're cloning, when you see me click here, you see that little plus sign that's popping up down beneath where I sampled. As I move my cursor, it's going to keep moving that sample point in relation to that. I'm going to go back to healing and maybe just blend some of these a little bit, kind of mush them together. Some technical terms, we'll mush them together. And we'll do that. And so to save a little time, because I want to get rid of all of these pulls, I actually have an image with some of the cloning done, just so that we can get to the fun stuff. And in the notes, I've indicated areas that I've cloned, so you can see that on there. So let's go down to, this is where we are now. So this was all of the healing and cloning I did. You can see the before and after. And another little trick, the way I did this part here, if you use the smudge tool, and that is, where did it go? This one that looks like a pointing finger. When something's near the edge, and I know I'm really not, it works great with even dark text, darker colors. You just kind of drag and you're just kind of blending that whole area and just kind of dragging it out. So that's how I did this area, was by using the smudge tool. So then I created a merged layer, and I'm going to delete the rest of these because that's the part we're going to get to now. So I merged all these. I did the Control-Alt-Shift-E, and we have our merged layer. And then I'm going to duplicate that. So what we're going to do first, actually I don't have to duplicate that one because we're going to use a Nik product. So let's go into Nik Viveza. Viveza is great at color correcting and great for brightness, and it just really makes the images look, the color look really, really good. So we are going to go in here, and I'm going to use the control points again. And I'm going to add one over this main flower. And then I'm going to move the circle. So that's too big. Just so it's covering most of this flower. And then from here, I think I moved my microphone. So let me know if you guys can't hear me. Yeah, somebody said mushing is very technical. Yes, it is. We like to mush and smush and whatever. So I'm going to use the sliders over here instead of the little ones. It's doing the exact same thing. I'm going to leave the brightness. I'm going to move the contrast up to 7, my saturation to 10 or 11, structure. We're going to add a little bit more, bring out some detail in those petals. I'm going to bring down the warmth a little bit. I want this to be a little cooler tone. And the blue, I'm also going to I'm going to add just a tad. Alrighty. And that will do that there. And I want to basically do the same thing over this flower. So this is where I can duplicate that control point and then just take the second one and we'll drag it over here and we can just adjust the size a little. So you don't have to re-enter all the same numbers. You're going to get the same effects by duplicating it. Alrighty, so now we're going to go, okay, back to Photoshop. And now and you can see this did do its own layer and it even names it for you. I'm going to duplicate that one and I'm going to go into my Topaz Studio and I'm going to do my AI clear and a little bit more precision detail in here. And even though at the end of this image it's going to be very soft and wispy looking, I like to start with, especially with flowers, start with it looking nice and sharp and clear, and then, you know, it may go a different direction at the end, but at least I know my petals are in good shape in the beginning here. So we have our AI clear. I'm going to use precision detail, and I'm just going to up the small details a little bit and the medium a little bit. And I do this to a lot of images, just gives it that little extra crispness in here. And then I am going to add a look, which is, you know, what used to be called presets. Under abstract category, under the look category, I did go to abstract, and the one that I liked is called smudged. And again, now we're totally undoing kind of what we did with the sharpening, but I know that my petals started out in good shape. So I'm going to, come on, no, it's still loading. And then once this actually applied and I saw this, I liked the effect of it on the main flowers, but I didn't like that it was giving me this, you know, blur of this flower in the background. So I'm going to trash this preset for a moment. And we're going to go back to Photoshop with just the detail and clear done. And we're going to do some more cloning. And this is where some of that extra healing and cloning came into play. I'm going to add another blank layer, and we could rename this with our AI clear and precision detail. Add my blank layer, and I'm going to do some more cloning here. And I want to get rid of some of this flower in the background and the one up at the top. I'm trying to do this quickly, so it's getting a little messy, but it will work. And then I'll show you the real final at the end, and you can kind of see the difference. And let's select from here. I want to get rid of some of this brighter area, and I want to get rid of some of this area. And I did actually come back a third time to do this area, but we're going to do it all now to save time. It's already 4:45. I can't even believe we're 45 minutes into this already. All right, come on. Let's make this go quicker. Can we? Probably not. Let's merge these in. We're going to do some more smushing and mushing and try and get these to go away. And it's not cooperating real well, but you'll get the idea. Obviously, I was much more careful when I did this before, but I'm trying to do it quickly. All right, I think that will work for now. Let's grab the healing brush and just try and blend a little of these areas. See if we can do that. All right, that will work for the moment. again, I'll give you an idea. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to do a merged layer again. Control Alt Shift E, because I want Topaz to be able to see this whole thing. So go back into our studio. Yes, thank you, Pat. Pat Reck out in Arizona, one of our friends. She always has some great feedback and answers a lot of questions during my webinars. She said the blank layer also allows the non-destructive edit. Somebody had asked about, doing non-destructive before. So by not doing it right on your layer, you can do that there. And it also, again, if you do something that you really didn't like, it's easy to just delete a layer rather than trying to undo a bunch of stuff. All right, so now we're going to do our smudged preset. And then I made a couple of adjustments in here. So I'm going to click on the impression, which is what is doing this particular preset. I'm going to come down to stroke length. I shortened a little bit. And the coverage transition, I moved all the way to 1 so it would fill out the corners better. And then we can touch up those couple little spots that are left. So let's accept that one. And voila. Now, I kind of thought this was done, and it could be done at this point. We could, just take our little healing tool and fix those 2 little corners, and darken those. And then I was looking at it going, what else can I do? Which is, what I do quite often. So I decided to crop a little bit of the black from the top since we got rid of that background flower. So that was the first thing I did. And then I decided, and this is something if you do competitions, judges may often say, well, our eye reads left to right. It would be better if these were leaning the other way. So I decided to go in and edit and transform this and flip it horizontal. So now the petals, the flowers are leaning towards the right. So our eye comes in and it's more the way our eye reads across the page. And I wanted to soften this maybe even a tad more. So I started poking around and trying some different things, and I went into the Nik Color Effects Pro, which are all of the creative filters. And I found a fog filter. And we're going to click on that. And this is, if you wanted to see your before and the after. And I'm going to leave that here because I'm going to change it just a little bit. I'm going to bring the intensity down a little bit because we don't want it too washed out. And then I took the shadows all the way over because I wanted to lighten those. Oh, not quite all the way. Let's see, shadows 69% and highlights 58%. And then I brought that back to Photoshop. And then there we go. We can close that panel down. And then I lowered the opacity of that layer a little to lessen this effect somewhat. So I came back about here and then added a layer mask and used a soft round brush, foreground color black. And I'm going to take the opacity of this brush down to about 30% or so. And then just lightly brushed some of the effect just from the petals themselves to bring back a little more of the color in here. A little bit on the back, more so on the front flowers, just so that they stood out a little more. And that's the basic edit. And I really liked the way that that one turned out. I thought it was very pleasing. And we have a question. Let's scroll down. Did I go into the Nik from the filter the Nik collection. Yeah, you can either go through the filter menu to the Nik, have to be on the layer, not the mask. You can go filter Nik collection and go in here. They do give you like a little panel, and mine, I have it docked down here in the corner, so I can just click on that panel and open it and select the products here. Either way, it gets you to the same place. Like most things in Photoshop and all these other programs, there's more than one way you can get to it. So I have this panel docked here, and you can move that around, but it seems to like docking itself down here, and that works well for me. Very nice edit to the flowers. Are the processes you applied going to be in the notes? Yes, they are. And there's some detailed screenshots too of the actual masking that I did, so you can kind of get an idea of where I masked to. So yes, there are very detailed instructions in the notes. Most of you guys know me who've done the notes before. For the other webinars, you know I'm pretty thorough with all the settings, and you can replicate the exact thing that I just did here. Alrighty, it's 5 of. Let's see if we can get one more quick one in. I'm not going to get probably to both of these, but I'm going to do, let's close this one. The next one is pretty easy with some textures, so we haven't really done that yet. Alrighty, you have a question, dear? Or is there a question? Is AI Clear still available in Studio One? In Studio One, AI Clear was one of, now Studio One itself was free. AI Clear was one of the pro adjustments that you had to purchase. So it's not available if you only have Studio One unless you purchased those before, because they're no longer selling those pro adjustments. In Studio 2, it's one price and you get all of the filters and everything is included. And if you had Studio 1, if you log into Topaz, you will see your own special pricing. And this was the image I wanted to show you guys from Lightroom. So this is the one that I'm going to use. This was from one of our Barnes and Back Roads workshops. This is one of the properties. Jim lets us roam around and do what we want. So this time we're going to start here in Lightroom. I'm going to go into my Develop tab, and I'm going to bring my exposure. It actually remembered my settings from before, so I'll quickly show you my exposure. I adjusted the contrast a little. I brought the highlights all the way down because there was some really bright light coming in this window. And I brought the shadows all the way up because they were quite dark on the left. And then I adjusted my whites and blacks, added some clarity and vibrance. And then we're going to go to Photoshop. So I usually start my images in Lightroom and do those basic adjustments here. And waiting for this to open. Did it come over here? Yes, it did. Alrighty, so now I'm going to do a little cropping and straightening here as well. So I'm going to use the straighten tool, and I'm going to click here and straighten that a little bit. And then I decided to crop down, and I cropped over to the edge of this little window that's leaning there, and pretty much left that side alone and say, okay. And then I'm going to add some textures to this one. So we're going to do, I'm dragging in from my other screen. Normally you would do File Open to bring in a texture if you're working on one screen. But I find it easier and quicker to do this since I have the second screen. And of course, for these projects for you guys, I have everything all lined up and ready to go. This is a texture from one of the new Procreate sets that I released last week, the pastels. So if you haven't worked with textures before, to make a texture interact with the layer beneath it, we're going to work with our blending modes. And in this case, I'm going to hit multiply to darken that a bit. And then I'm going to bring back the opacity to lessen that effect a little bit. And then I'm going to bring in another texture. This is from the other Procreate collection of darker textures. This one isn't super dark, but we're going to stretch that out. And this one we're going to do a blending mode of soft light and lower this one to about there. And then I decided that with this one that had that one spot that was part of the texture and I didn't really like it on the door. So I'm going to go into my edit, transform, and I'm going to flip this vertically. So it just moved that down here and it kind of got rid of that one spot. I didn't really like the way that looked. And then the last texture, I'm going to bring in one of my borders ones from the grunge texture. And these also come as brushes, which I did try the first time I used this. I actually did it with a brush, but it's easier with the notes and stuff to give you this PNG version, which is the transparent version of this. So I'm going to use this here so you can see how it works. I'm going to change my blending mode to hard light. And I bring back my opacity somewhat. And then I decided I didn't really like the way the black looked of this. I'm going to change the color of this. First, I'm going to change this layer. I'm going to rasterize it because it comes in as a smart object when I drag it in. And I want to click my foreground color. And I had just clicked around the area to find a dark brown. And so the number I ended up with is 4E3113. This like kind of almost reddish brown. Now there's two ways you can change the color in here because I don't want to add color to the transparent pixels. I only want to add it to the pixels that already hold color. You can either lock the layer by hitting this little lock button here and then do Alt backspace, or on a Mac that's Option Delete, and that will fill the layer. The other way, if you don't want to use the lock button, is when you do Alt backspace, because that would fill the whole layer. If I just did the Alt backspace, I don't want the whole layer full. If I hold the Shift key and do my Alt backspace, that will also preserve those transparent pixels. And then I added a layer mask, used my round brush, and just took a little bit of the texture off of the door and this window here. I didn't really take all of it off, but I just wanted a little bit more of the actual texture on the items to show through. So you can see here where I've masked it. And that would be that final image. And we're at 5:01, so I'm not going to get to the last. The last one I was going to do, I'll just show it really quick. I did an HDR with, I typically use Photomatix for my HDRs, but Nik also has an option for HDR. So I will show you the finished image just so you can see it. And of course, these are all in the notes and you get all of the source images to do this with. So I blended 5 images for this one. And that was because there's a very bright sky and, you know, the building, if I expose for the sky, the building was basically black. And if I exposed for the building, then my sky was blown out. So I brought those 5 in and merged them. Then I did Vidveza to jazz up the color just a teeny bit, AI clear. And then I cloned, there was, let's turn off a couple layers. There was a little cow over here on this edge part of the cow. So I couldn't really clone it super well. So I actually used the rectangular marquee and sampled like the grass from here. And then if you hit Control J when you have a selection made, it will put it on a separate layer. And then you can just move it. And then I did the same thing up here to get the rest of it gone. So there's little tricks here you can do to get rid of things like that. And then I did a brightness adjustment and then merged it. And that was it. I have a merged copy, but I didn't really need that one. So that was from 5 images to get one nicely exposed image. And that's the end of our projects. I have a couple questions. I'm going to throw up the sales slide while I'm answering some questions. All right, so I recently discovered the use of libraries to add my texture so I can drag directly within Photoshop. Yes, that is a good point, Lynn. I also do have some directories, and I've started loading things, but I know not everybody uses that, so that's why during the demos I don't usually use those. I haven't really finished setting mine up. You can also load your textures in Bridge and bring them in from there. I know some people who like to do it that way. So as always, you know, more than one way to skin a cat and more than one way to do that. But I do like that idea of using the libraries. And I think that's most of what we have for questions right here. All right, on the last image, did you add the sky? No, I did not add the sky on that HDR one. That was the sky I had that morning. And somebody says, where do I access the notes? If you go here to meredithimages.com/products and click on webinar notes, they're available in the store for just $5. And that includes the notes, all of the images and textures that I used today. So I think that covers all of our questions. Thanks for hanging in a few extra minutes, everyone. I appreciate your being here. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving for those who are celebrating, and stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks.